Gilbert was leering at Princess Alira's breasts like they were a wet, sweet, juicy piece of ham. Gilbert was a huge, lumbering monstrosity of a man, his belly ballooned from years of ale and, well, ham. The stupid brute had no idea the princess was very conscious of his staring, and she mentally noted to herself to have him executed on the spot. To Gilbert's defence, Alira's breasts were literally magnificent. They were way too big. She must have sported a G-cup, yet her frame was quite slender. Ew, she thought. Just thinking about what he's thinking is giving me the chills. She shook it off and focused back on the road. The princess was being escorted to the neighbouring kingdom of Rockwell. She had done this without telling her father, in hopes of having a little fun before she was finally married off. She knew she'd have little say in the matter and would likely be given to a man who wouldn't treat her well. She just hoped he wasn't ugly. As she thought that, she saw a green, ugly man peering out from the wood line on the side of the road, and she said out loud, "Now that's an ugly man." Then came the slow, dawning realization in her head, That's a goblin." After that, madness unfolded. About 100 goblins came out from the trees like chameleons. One older-looking goblin male yelled out, "Attack!" like a deranged lunatic. Well, I guess he was deranged. And a lunatic. I mean, he's a goblin. He's probably never heard of a toothbrush or a shower, as far as I know. So yes, he was deranged. Anyway, once the goblin started charging toward the princess's carriage, Reinhardt, one of the many people charged with protecting her, was up for the task. You see, Reinhardt was a very brave man. Some might say too brave. Reinhardt charged out into the swarm of goblins, swinging heavyweight strikes into the chests and necks of the green, vile monsters. And actually, he was taking out a massive amount. After killing 10, he shouted, "I'm literally unstoppable." But right as he said those words, as if some divine force had heard him and wanted to spite him, he was killed. Instantly, a goblin had stabbed him in the nape of the neck. Seeing this, the rest of the princess's soldiers finally got into a strategic position. Reinhardt's death reminded them just how fragile their lives really were. Gilbert took the point, as the formidable, massive warrior he was. With him still alive, everyone, including the princess, felt relatively safe. Close behind Gilbert was Timmy. Timmy was a timid warrior who really had no business being out there. Truly a case of a man who had slipped through the cracks and shouldn't be anywhere near a battlefield. Honestly, Timmy should have been working as a nursing home attendant, or some shit. Timmy was ashamed of the small man he was, and even more ashamed of the small penis he had, for some reason. When the older goblin had shouted, Timmy had pissed his pants. Behind him were the supports, Rika and Lenny. Rika provided healing, as well as confidence to the weak-willed adventurers. Lenny was a necromancer, and quite a talented one at that. He raised his wrinkled arm and lifted half of the fallen goblins. And Reinhardt, from the dead. The sight was horrific. Reinhardt and the bloodied goblins, their guts hanging out, even the undead smelled like rot and despair. Gilbert began to chop through goblins, making quick work of the smaller, inferior creatures. He sliced the one that appeared to be the leader, instantly dislodging his torso from his waist. The leader-looking goblin fell to the ground and died, his face making no changes as he was killed in an instant. The horde of goblins, still about 150, seemed unaffected. Actually, while this had happened, the goblins had pressed closer to the carriage and the party protecting it. One particularly ugly goblin grabbed Lenny's staff and broke it. Then he started doing a little dance, shuffling side to side, thrusting his hips and balls into the air like a madman. Now, without his staff, Lenny was basically as useful as a sack of bricks. He was swarmed, mutilated by the little enemies. His legs and arms were pulled apart from his body. Lenny screamed like a man being pulled apart by goblins. Ah! But his screams were cut short when he was pierced through the heart by a goblin's spear. Gilbert, meanwhile, continued to assault goblins. His kill total rose to 70, but he was getting tired. No one else was doing much. Things turned from grim to bleak when Rika was grabbed by the goblins. They were roughing her up, but for some reason they hadn't killed her. She was knocked unconscious by a large rock. After this, Timmy pooped in the pants he had already pissed in. Timmy had a grand total of 1 kill, finishing off a little goblin that Lenny had already pummeled and left clinging to life. Timmy was literally right behind Gilbert, clinging to his pathetic existence. Seeing this, the princess was in deep distress. She had limited options. She had no combat abilities. She could run, or she could hope Gilbert outlasted another 100 goblins. Though she was scared, she thought, there's no way a goblin could land a killing blow on this giant monster who is Gilbert, though that was mostly true. Goblins were very cunning and disgusting creatures, and they were about to prove it. A group of goblins started launching projectiles at the giant, surprisingly fast. The projectiles were bottles of dark orangish fluids. 2 hit Gilbert in the face, 1 more hit him in the chest, 2 others missed. Gilbert's face turned to horror when some of the liquid got in his mouth. He might survive this encounter, but he knew what he had just swallowed meant he'd probably die at some point. It was goblin piss. Goblin piss is made up of who knows what the fuck. All you really need to know is it's vile, 10 times nastier than regular piss. It's literally the equivalent of drinking liquid horseshit. Another goblin knocked a fire arrow and aimed at the piss under Gilbert's feet. His aim was true. The brute went up in flames. Gilbert was literally on fire, but his constitution was a whopping 100. So, still he stood, slowly dying of poison and flames. Gilbert was on death's door, and he knew he didn't have long for this world, but he also knew, deep in his soul, what would happen to the princess if he failed. He looked back at her, Princess Elira, whose beauty was unmatched. She almost looked like a literal angel. He half believed, somewhere in the depths of his soul, that if he pulled this off, she might actually be willing to sleep with him. And with that, his spirit resolved. He steadied his steps, straightened his posture, and pointed his sword at the green demons. Berserk mode! And his body swelled with power, massively increasing in size. Gilbert began to destroy the goblin horde, almost in an instant. Honestly, it was miraculous what he was doing. He was single-handedly taking out the goblin army, but sadly, he was already at the end of his rope. With his last portion of strength, he swung and killed 10 more, leaving only 9 goblins left. Then, Gilbert breathed his last breath. There were 9 goblins left. A couple of them were guarding the already captured, yet eerily uninjured, Rika. Rika, barely regaining consciousness, had a strong-willed female warrior mind, one that didn't quite match her petite mage form. Come on, Timmy, you're our only hope. Surely you can take on a measly 9 little goblins. This was untrue. Timmy could absolutely not take on 9 goblins. The good news? He only had to take on 7. The other 2 were busy watching the tied-up healer, Rika. One goblin slapped Rika in the face and said, "Shut up, you stupid bitch." Rika didn't flinch, didn't even react to the punishment. She just looked onward, at Timmy. Timmy had already shat and pissed in his pants, and yet he believed. He believed that if he tried his very best, if he eked out every bit of strength he had in his little body, he would most definitely still die, and probably horribly. So, Timmy did the only thing a sane person would do. He ran for his life. "Run, Timmy, run, you spineless bastard!" The goblins cheered and laughed at the shameless man, and the few remaining goblins, they turned their eyes to their female prizes.